Welcome to Dr. Creepin's dungeon. Well, they say there's something haunting in the light of the moon. There's all the dispassionateness of a disembodied soul, and something of its inconceivable mystery, as we will see in tonight's 4 stories. Now, my dear friends, as always, before we begin, a note of caution. Tonight's stories may contain strong language, as well as descriptions of violence and horrific imagery. If that sounds like your kind of thing, then let's begin. So, those that know me and know what I do, call me the cleaner. I'm what you might call a bounty hunter, except I deal with very special cases. Stuff that nobody else can really handle. I seek out the filth, the otherworldly beings, even what you might think of as supernatural, and I terminate it. I don't discriminate, I don't hesitate, I just squeeze the trigger. I'm not open for hire. I only take contracts from one person. And no, I can't bring you into the fold. It's something you're born into, and there's only ever a handful of us alive at a time. I can't go too far into the details, but I am allowed to say this. It all starts with a slip of paper, usually an envelope in the mail. Sometimes, though, in very rare cases, I will get a letter in person. I call her Star. She's not allowed to tell me her real name. And no, Star isn't her code name. Traditionally, someone like her would just be called a messenger. Nothing else. That is all they are. I call her Star, though. She has a real bright personality. Figured it fit. Now, I'm going to share a story with you all. Not that I'm really a storyteller, so you'll just have to forgive me if the format is weird. But I'll let you in on my life. Peel back the curtain just a little. I had a case a few years back. Started, like I said, with a knock at the door, which always gets my heart pumping. You see, we cleaners don't have friends, and we don't visit each other. So a knock at the door can only mean one thing. Star is there waiting with a special case. I unlocked the deadbolt, grabbed the cold doorknob, and slowly edged the door open. There was Star, as expected, greeting me with the huge smile she always wore on her face. "Morning, Mr. Clean. How you doing?" she asked politely, moving her bangs out of her eyes. I returned the smile and motioned for her to enter. Still alive, so I'm doing better than most of the people I know. We made our way into the kitchen, and I poured her a glass of water, something I always did for a messenger. I'm going to take a wild guess and assume this isn't a social visit. I handed her the glass of water. "Oh, thank you." She took the glass and sipped on the water before replying. "You know, one of these days I'm just going to pop by to hang out." It was a nice thought, but I knew it could never happen. It's against the rules, and no one breaks the rules. But you are right. She pulled an envelope from her back pocket. This one is gonna be a toughie. There were 2 pictures. Usually I got only one. She placed them on the table. The photos were of 2 monstrous-looking beasts, hairy and huge. I instantly recognized what they were, and immediately got a pit in my stomach. Star must have noticed because she responded with a reassuring pat on the back. "Oh, you can do it." They were lycanthropes, or more commonly known as werewolves. They're about as tough as it gets. Yeah, probably. But 2? Really? I shook my head and sighed. Am I to, take them on alone? Yup, and we both know what that means. She paused to drink more water. They're mating, so we're gonna need you to deal with this as quickly as possible. Can't be giving them a chance to separate and disappear. Lycanthropes are pretty much what they appear to be like in the movies. Vicious, strong, fast. Practically the perfect killing machine. However, in real life, they don't have any special weakness. They die the same way as everything else. And the best way to do it is blood loss. Explosives work well too, but that can tend to get messy, and you might blow yourself up too. I prefer hit and run tactics, and that's a problem when there's 2 though. You have to severely injure both of them before they have the chance to rip you to shreds. It is preferred to take them out before they have the chance to morph, but you've got a 50-50 on that though. Normally you won't see 2 in the same place, because they are extremely territorial. I groaned again. Ah, fuck. Alright, I'll do it. Give me 2 weeks tops. If I don't check in, I'm dead. Contact 2 if that happens. She can take over the case. I'll doubt it'll come to that. Star always has confidence in my abilities. You always coming out on top, one way or another. I snickered. Yeah, well, just give me the details. The sooner I plan this suicide mission, the better. I was awarded a laugh from Star. Yes, sir. So, here's what we got. So, of course, I can't actually go into the details of the locations and the contacts we used in the area. All I can say is that the events went down in a town in the United States. I'm sure the more curious of you will try to search for news reports and whatnot, but I promise you that you're not going to find anything. Any shred of evidence that was there is gone. My family's been doing this for a very long time. We're a lot better at this than you are. You will find nothing. Now, when a cleaner goes looking for information, there's really only one thing that can give you reliable facts. An imp. That's what we call them. They don't really have a name in the English language. They're half human and half, I guess what you would call, a demon. They're about as close to human as monsters can get. I know they may sound scary, but there's a reason we call them imps. They're small, weak, feeble creatures. The only thing they have going for them is their longevity. They're pretty much immortal. And only a handful of them are still living. So, being that they pose no threat, we don't put them on the kill list. Imps are good for one thing, and one thing only. Information gathering. Ins and outs, they know it all. And for a price, they'll tell you everything you need to know. So, when I arrived at the small town, I arranged a meeting with the local imp via my contacts. Naturally, he wanted to meet in a public place. The otherworldly aren't really trusting of us cleaners. It was the middle of the day when we met. I spotted him sitting on a bench, right in the middle of the park. To the average passerby, he might have looked like a small, odd-looking little middle-aged man, not worth more than 2 looks. I instantly noted the signs, however. Pointed left ear, hunched posture, one red eye and one blue. Imps all have the same disfigurements. They can easily blend in with contacts and whatnot, though. You might even have met one before, without even knowing it. I plopped down next to him. Mind if we cut to the chase, Imp? The Imp grunted and turned to face me, his thick brows already furrowed. Yeah, you're all the same, you cleaners. Been dealing with you lot for over a century. Always impatient. Never enough time to chat, eh? He sighed deeply, obviously not wanting to be there. I shrugged my shoulders. Sorry if I don't ask you about the weather. I've got a job to do. Neither of us gets paid by the hour. Now, tell me about the doggies. The Imp looked at me, eyebrows still furrowed, notably displeased with my response. Well, treating them like dogs will definitely get you 6 feet under. I didn't respond, silently encouraging him to continue. There's 2 of them. They're young, early, maybe mid-20s. They're gonna be strong, but you've got to get the upper hand with experience, I would think. He paused as a mother and her rather chubby kid passed by. 3 victims so far, but they were all human, so they won't be ready for something like you. He scratched his hairy chin and looked at me with his mismatched eyes. The female's name is Karen, the other, Brandon. And where are Karen and Brandon staying? I inquired. There's a lodge in the woods, east, all the way at the back. They're on private property. They stay there on the weekends. He rubbed his eyes and yawned. Are we done yet? I need a nap. Last question. Why haven't they been caught yet? 3's a lot of missing people. The Imp was quick to respond. They only take homeless. People that won't be missed. And before I could get anything else, he was up on his feet, hobbling away. Good luck, cleaner. You're gonna need it. Can't say I'll miss you if you die. He cackled as he walked away. Yeah, charming creatures. He was right, though. I'd need all the luck. Killing 1 werewolf is difficult. Killing 2 approaches the impossible. You have to plan, weigh the risks heavily, and hope that it all goes smoothly. And it has to go smooth. Bearing that in mind, I rested up, got familiar with the terrain, and eventually I found myself hiking through the thickest parts of the forest a few days later. It was dark. Not a single hint of moonlight was able to push its way through the thick canopy. I decided that it would be better to take them out after daylight hours. By then, they would have their next victim all ready, and the feast would have begun. Werewolves are emotional creatures, so I could only hope they were caught up in the ritual. Pitiful that I had to let a civilian die in the process. Well, not all hunts are without collateral damage, I reassured myself. Took about half an hour of wading through the thick trees before I started approaching a clearing. I could see the small cabin in the distance. At first glance, it was quite homely looking. Wooden walls, a fireplace smoking, even a sign that said welcome. There was one thing that did break the illusion, however. The screams. The bone-chilling screams of a man whose flesh was being peeled from his bones. I could see him, laying on a table, arms and legs strapped down. A man and a woman standing over him. The man had a large blade and was slicing through his skin like it was butter. They were chanting in an old language, one that doesn't even have a name. Their voices were guttural, and a deeper pitch than humans were possible of making. It was the mating ceremony. They flay the victim alive, eat the skin, drain the blood into buckets, and then smear themselves in the blood. It was a sick and twisted ritual, and I didn't give them the chance to finish it. I looked down the iron sights of my rifle, picking my first target, the male, Brandon. The first shot ripped through the forest until it found its mark. The bullet tore through the man's chest, stopping his heart in an instant. Blood spattered on the ground as he slumped to his knees and fell to his face. Karen reacted almost instantaneously and dashed behind the trees to the right of the house. I expected that, though. Werewolf reflexes were remarkable even when in human form. I already knew what would happen next. She would change, become the monster I was sent to kill. The werewolf transformation is a slow, excruciatingly painful process. So I've heard, at least. Bones grow and break to morph the body into a massive beast. Hair stabs through the skin, creating roots where none existed before. Their teeth all fall out, and one by one are replaced by vicious fangs. Fingers and toenails are pushed out. In their place, only sharp bones remain, twice as long, strong and sharp. Close-quarter combat against them is, well, a terrible idea. Almost always fatal. I sighed and checked my surroundings. There were no signs of Karen. Maybe she... An abrupt, inhuman screech tore through the forest. It was distant, but they were known for their ability to cover ground fast. Everything got quiet after that. Oh, fuck. I could feel the tremor in my hand already. Her transformation was complete, and I had just killed her lover. Again, they are very emotional creatures, passionate to their very core. I emptied the chamber of my rifle and pushed another round into it. It wasn't human anymore. Slowly, I started making my way towards the lodge, taking care not to make the slightest of sounds. I was inching my way to the ritual table. "Help me," I could hear the man croak out as I neared. "They're gonna kill me. Please help me." His voice was getting weaker. I looked over his bloody mess of a body, or at least what was left of it. "You need to call an ambulance." His breathing was more labored now, wheezing as his lungs fought for oxygen. I rested my hand on his forehead. "Oh, it's gonna be all right. Close your eyes. I'll take it from here." He tried to say something more, but his eyes slowly drifted shut, and his breathing eventually stopped. It was a shitty way to die. I let my eyes trail down to the other dead man, Brandon, the Lycanthrope. Oh, he was young. Brown hair, blue eyes, and a hole in his chest. On the surface level, you can't even tell that they aren't human. There's no giveaway like there is with the imps. Werewolves are hard to find, unless, of course, they've morphed and are hunting you. I nudged him with my boot. No movement. Good, I thought. I stepped over his body and moved towards their cabin. I had to shut myself in. I needed to trap the beast. I opened the door slowly, pushing it with my rifle, making sure to close it behind me. The fireplace was still lit, making the shadows dance on the walls. Very homely indeed, I said absent-mindedly. And it was. There wasn't much to it, but it was nice. A sofa and recliner by the fire. A kitchen past that. No TV, though. I looked back at the dead body outside. I guess they had, other interests. There were paintings on the walls, mostly of wolves and the such. Brandon's signature was on all of them. Guess he was a painter when he wasn't busy being a werewolf. Another screech tore through the forest, much closer this time. It was stalking the tree line, deciding how to attack. I snapped back to the task at hand. Right, best get to it then. I needed to immobilize the beast. I smiled as I dropped my duffel bag to the floor and set aside 2 large bear traps. Even a lycanthrope can't ignore steel teeth biting into its bones. I placed one by the door, maybe 5 feet away, and one by the window next to the fireplace. This ought to do. I waited, and I waited. 3 hours went by before I heard it again. The beast was smart to wait that long. I was tired, and the recliner was definitely helping me to fall asleep, especially with the warmth of the fire. However, the second I heard it, my adrenaline kicked into overdrive. It was circling the house, heavy footballs making solid thuds, made no attempt to hide its presence, growling after every other breath. Werewolves are masters at stalking their prey. You can only hear them when they want you to. It was no wonder she was able to get to the house without me noticing. She wanted me intimidated, and I was. I could hear the slow scraping of her talons as she carved into the house, the low guttural growl as she grew bolder with each step. Boom! The cabin shook violently as something smashed against it. Paintings fell from the walls. My body trembled, and then it got quiet. No more footsteps, no more growling. It was in kill mode. Oh, shit. Every hair on my body was at attention. Goosebumps rose on my arms, and the tremor in my hand returned. All the experience in the world can't save you from the terror of a pissed-off lycanthrope. I took a deep breath and slowly stood from the chair, rifle in hand. I doused the fire and positioned myself in the center of the room, equal distance to either of the traps. With the fire out, it was dark, and hopefully it wouldn't see the bear traps. You will die. It was a deep, almost demonic thing to hear a werewolf talk. Before I could react, the beast burst through the front door. I had to duck as the door flew past my head and crashed into the kitchen. There wasn't much light, but I could see enough. Maybe 8 feet tall, black fur, several 100 pounds. Oh, it was frightening. Muscles bulging, eyes glaring, fangs bared. It was pissed. At me. I couldn't afford to waste a second, though. I raised the rifle and opened fire. Shot after shot. 3 times I fired on the beast. The attack barely phased it, as it only walked closer. The bullets ripped through its body, and blood slowly leaked out, coating the monster in a crimson glow. But it didn't care. They're tough. I just had to buy time, wait for it to step into the trap. That's it. Come and get me, I shouted, squeezing the trigger once more. The bullet hit its ear. The beast roared in anger. Just one more step, and I had the monster. Yeah, that. It stopped right in front of the trap and leaned forward so that its head was in the moonlight. ears flat against its wolf-like skull, grey eyes staring me down, and its bared fangs at me. You! It flung the bear trap to the side, causing it to clatter against the wall and snap shut. Die now. It roared menacingly, and before I could react, it lunged at me, clearing the distance in one leap. It swatted me like a fly and sent me crashing into the fireplace. I hit hard and nearly cracked my skull open on the brick. Her sharp claws had sliced through my vest like butter and gashed me open. Everything was blurry, and my head felt like it was swimming in circles. I managed to push myself off of the ground. I was greeted with another ear-splitting screech. I felt my eardrums pop as I fell back against the fireplace. Even across the room, I could feel how hot its breath was, and the smell. Oh, it reeked of death. However, I couldn't afford not to act, so I reached for the pistol on my belt and opened fire again. I was dazed, but I got lucky. The bullet hit it in the head. It wasn't enough to kill it, not by a long shot, but it gave me a chance to move. I could see it fall back and break the dining table it was next to. It was disoriented, and I used that to make my way to the window. I stumbled as I walked, almost falling on the trap that I'd set earlier. I lifted the glass pane and threw myself onto the windowsill. I let my body slowly slide out the other side. I needed to put distance between us and formulate a new plan. Oh! My ankle erupted in pain. I could hear an audible pop as the werewolf crushed my bone with its grip, whilst also digging its sharp claws into my skin. It had caught my leg just as I was sliding out. "Oh, you fucking bitch," I shouted. My entire leg felt as though it was on fire. I was in a bad spot, more or less dangling out of the window. I could see its head sticking halfway out of the window now. I fired multiple rounds into its jaw, not giving it a chance to finish a sentence. The beast jerked its head back, smashing the top of the window as it did. I felt my ankle slip from its grip and my head smash on the ground as I fell onto the grass. I couldn't stand. My vision was fading, and the last thing I could hear was the beast pounding on the walls. "Oh," I groaned as I sat forward. I was alive, but only barely. I was in a puddle of my own blood, and I couldn't use my left leg. It took me nearly 10 minutes to stand up, and another few to hobble over to the cabin window. What was left of it anyway? Karen, the werewolf, was seemingly dead. I leaned myself against the walls and peered inside. From what I could see, it looked as though the beast had bled out. Several bullet wounds, a bear trap still clamped on its ankle. Guess you stepped on it right before you snatched my leg. Even large pieces of glass sticking out of the back of its head. Looks like you died trying to break the wall down, though. I pulled my burner out of my pocket and dialed my only contact. Mission is a success. Gonna need a cleanup crew and a pickup for myself. Oh, and bring Helga. I'm hurt pretty bad. I let myself slide down against the wall. I drifted off, looking at the stars. They looked especially dull that night. It took me a few days to wake up from that. Spent even longer in recovery. Witch doctors can only get you so far. Well, that's the story for now. You don't have to believe me, but I assure you, some of the old legends are true. I might write again. I've got plenty to tell. For now, though, I've got business to attend to.
The clan of the Red Wolf. I'm a student at Bridgewater State in Massachusetts. I share a dorm with my roommate, Wallace. We both major in computer science, and that's all we've ever talked about on the rare occasions that we actually speak to one another. We don't have much else in the way of common ground. You see, Wallace is an odd guy. He's very socially awkward and doesn't have many friends, if any at all. I've only ever seen him talking to his professors, and one time the janitor. It's safe to say that Wallace is a recluse. Because of this, I don't know much about him. I'd love for the guy to open up more, but I'm not sure how to go about doing that. Besides, I have enough on my plate as it is between exams and the struggle of day-to-day finances. Well, as cliché as it might sound, ramen is a popular meal on campus. Another one of Wallace's quirks is his obsessive-compulsive nature. He conducts himself in a very specific manner and has his daily routine mapped out to a T. And it never changes. When he wakes up, he brushes his teeth, making sure to gargle and spit exactly 3 times. He then puts on a striped shirt followed by khaki pants, and his wardrobe never changes. He always arrives to class 5 minutes early and turns in his assignments a day before they're due. And this is how it's always been. And how do I know all of this? Well, being a socially awkward hermit, Wallace didn't tell me these things. I don't think he's even aware that his routine is a byproduct of OCD. I'm not claiming to know exactly what causes Wallace's actions, but I do minor in psychology. It's just something I've picked up on during the last 2 years I've lived with the guy. Well, it's almost impossible not to notice. Knowing Wallace's usual behavioral patterns, I noticed that something wasn't right. He began sleeping in his clothes, not brushing his teeth, and not passing in his assignments on time. Eventually, he stopped sleeping in our dorm altogether. After over a day of not seeing him, things started looking grim. Despite not knowing Wallace all that well, I became worried. Depression and suicide rates are at an all-time high for our age group. I didn't want the poor guy doing something stupid. That worry justified me hacking into his laptop to see what he'd been up to. It was the only thing I could think to do. In finding his laptop and turning it on, I felt like a fool. The thing was as clean as a whistle, at least to my eyes. You see, though I pride myself in my tech know-how, Wallace is far more adept in the field. It's safe to say that I wouldn't find a shred of evidence as to where he might be or what he'd been doing. No journal entries, no browsing history, no nothing. Feeling anxious, I thought about any other potential ways to continue my hunt for the truth. That's when something clicked. Like I said before, I sometimes saw Wallace talking to the janitor in the halls. He was the only person I'd ever seen him speak with at length. It was possible that he'd know something about Wallace's state of affairs. Later that night, I exited my dorm and wandered the halls. Eventually I found Chuck, the janitor. I tried to be gentle when confronting him, as he had his back to me and was known to be hard of hearing. Still, when I tapped on his shoulder, he jumped. "Holy cheeseballs! You nearly scared me half to death." Chuck laughed through his bushy grey moustache. "What can I do for you, son?" I told Chuck about my predicament and how I was concerned for Wallace, having not seen him in a while. Chuck's happy expression transformed into a look of unease and tension. He seemed to know a bit more than I did. "Well, here's the thing. Wallace is a good kid. We do chat from time to time. I happen to know where he might be, but I wouldn't feel comfortable blurting out the details of his social life to anyone who asked, even if you are his roommate." Social life? Wallace didn't have a social life. I pressured Chuck into letting me in on the secret. I really laid it on thick, expressing a great deal of concern for Wallace's well-being. Being the nice old janitor that Chuck is, he eventually gave in. Okay, I understand. Just please don't tell him I told you, okay?" I nodded, eagerly awaiting for him to reveal Wallace's whereabouts. "Wallace has been feeling really down lately. He's got no one to talk to but me. Kid wanted some friends, people that he could hang out with and talk to, you know. I listened closely for the details I so desperately sought after. So, Wallace went on something he called, what was it? The Deep Web. And on there he found a group of people. Called themselves the Clan of the Red Wolf, or something like that. Invited him to one of their meetings. That's probably where he is right now. He seemed pretty excited when he told me about it. In fact, it's all he's been talking about for the past week. There. That was it. That was the bit of info I needed. The key to finding Wallace. I thanked Chuck and gave him a goodnight wave as I ran back to my dorm room. From the sounds of it, Wallace had got himself involved with another group of people who share in his interests, and eventually they invited him to hang out in real life. Well, they had a quirky name, the Clan of the Red Wolf, and that's all I needed to find them on the deep web myself. Soon enough, I'd be able to find my missing roommate. Well, it took quite a while, but I finally managed to find a deep web forum pertaining to the so-called clan. It contained nothing but a description and a series of videos. Here's the description as it appeared on the site. Welcome to your new belief system. We are the Clan of the Red Wolf, and we're here to help. There are 7 educational videos on this site, each tailored to a specific belief that we want to share with you. You are asked to watch these 7 programs to understand our doctrine. If you make it to the last one, you will be invited into our den. Good luck. Oh, the summary was bizarre, but nothing less than what I'd expected. Scrolling further, I noticed that all of the videos were titled similarly. Day 1, Day 2, and so on. Naturally, I watched them. The whole series reminded me of old war propaganda. It was made in the style of a vintage cartoon, starring a wolf as the main focus. Well, not a normal wolf, but a cartoon caricature version of one. Just, picture a character similar to Wile E. Coyote. In each video, the wolf learned a new clan value from the campy male narrator. Not unlike old cartoons, the wolf comically goes against the narrator's wishes and suffers the consequences before learning his lesson. Every video ends with the narrator saying, "Join the pack. You never have to feel alone again." I guess that was what the selling point was for Lonely Wallace. Now I'll share with you a bit of the transcript from each video, along with any points of interest. Video 1. Wildlife. Treat flora and fauna with dignity and respect. They're people too. Trees provide you with the air you breathe, and animals share the earth with you, keeping you from being alone. They deserve more than you ever will. The wolf relieves himself on a tree. The tree falls on top of him, crushing his head and revealing the blood and brain matter inside. Video 2. Thicker than blood. Your blood is the most important material in your earthly vessel. The clan requires a sample upon joining our order. This is a requirement for all pledges. Our blood must flow as one for us to work together and save the planet. The wolf enters a room full of cloak figures, presumably clan members. All members are in line, giving blood samples. The wolf refuses to have his blood drawn and walks away. The cloak figure sneaks up on him and slices his throat with a dagger. The video focuses on the wolf bleeding out for a few moments before fading to black. Video 3. Obey or suffer. Remember what happened to our friend when he didn't give his blood to the cause? He didn't obey our order's rules, so he had to suffer the consequences. Remember, the clan's laws are important. You must obey or perish. Trust me, it's worth it. Shows the wolf bleeding out again. Only now a few cloaked figures are on top of him, stabbing his corpse repeatedly. Video 4. Vow of secrecy. The clan of the Red Wolf is often misunderstood. Because of this, it is important to never tell anyone of our existence under any circumstances. You may only speak about clan activity with other clan members. Break this rule, and you will perish. Wolf is shown talking to his wolf pals and showing them his new cloak. The cloak figure walks in frame with what looks like a semi-automatic weapon and opens fire. The wolves fall to the ground, dead. The cloak figure gives a thumbs up before the video ends. Video 5. Learn and understand. If you're welcomed into our inner sanctum, you will be greeted with knowledge. We abide by the word of the Red Wolf, and you will too. You will be expected to learn and understand his teachings, otherwise you will fail, not only the clan, but the entire world. Wolf is seen in a classroom environment, taking a test of some sort. He turns it into a cloak teacher and receives an F. The entire class points and laughs at him, and then pulls out a plethora of medieval weaponry from their robes. They then proceed to close in on the wolf. The wolf swallows the lump in his throat before the video ends. Video 6. Tasks and Rituals. As a new recruit, you will be asked to carry out various tasks, ranging from the mundane to the fantastic. Most of these missions will involve fetching ingredients for our rituals. As boring as this may sound, it is the most important thing you can ever do for the clan. Rituals are what give the clan power. Without this power, we cannot hope to rid the world of what plagues it. Wolf fails to bring ingredients to clan member for ritual. Jump cut to Wolf being sacrificed on a black altar atop a pentagram carved into the floor. He is beaten, cut open, and eventually torn apart by his fellow clansmen. Video 7. Mortals. When accepted as a fully fledged clan member, you are no longer considered human. You will be one of us. From that point forward, you are discouraged from any and all human interaction, unless it is deemed necessary to the cause. Humans are vile, filthy, disgusting, and dangerous creatures. We seek to exterminate them once and for all. Any human who knows of our existence and isn't deemed worthy enough to join must be killed. Nature is your only friend. Wolf is walking down a main street-like environment and can be seen waving to people he sees. He comes upon a clan member who then pierces his gut with a long blade and tosses him aside in the road, where he's then run over by numerous cars. The content of the videos was incredibly jarring. I almost couldn't believe that such a cult would actually exist, let alone that Wallace would join them. He must have been really, really lonely. The last video exited with the same "join the pack" spiel, and then faded out to a screen with a series of numbers. I assumed this was my invitation into the den, perhaps an encrypted set of coordinates leading to the clan's lair. That, I thought, must have been where Wallace had gone. I wrote down the code and immediately started doing some research to begin cracking it. Just as I was in the thick of things, something hit me. One of the videos stated that you couldn't talk to anyone about the clan under any circumstances. But Wallace had talked to Chuck. That didn't make any sense. Wallace was a stickler for rules. Another fact hit me. The video stated that you could only talk about clan activity with another clan member. What if Chuck was one of them? Chuck could be stationed at the college to recruit members, and he simply nudged Wallace in the right direction. He could have been playing dumb with me when I questioned him. So, either Chuck was a clansman, or Wallace broke a cardinal rule. Neither theory held much water. If Chuck was a member, then why would he have told me anything without either recruiting or killing me? And if Wallace was so eager to be accepted into a strict cult, then why would he disobey their wishes? I couldn't make much sense of either angle. I eventually gave in to the notion that perhaps Wallace simply disregarded the rules in lieu of his excitement. He was finally going to have friends, so he had to tell someone. This didn't completely sit well with me, but I had to get back to cracking the code. I didn't have time to dwell on uncertainties. Just then, there was a knock at my dorm room door, followed by a voice. "It's, Chuck, the janitor. I'm here to tidy up your room." Chuck never cleaned dorm rooms. That wasn't part of his job. "Oh, I'm all set," I yelled, hoping he'd leave me be. The knocking ceased. There was a long stretch of silence, followed by a soft, metallic creak. The doorknob was turning.
This story was related to me by a veteran of the Second World War. Names have been changed for legal reasons, but the story I'm about to present is, at least to the man telling me this, accurate and true. I met him in a retirement home for veterans as part of a community service order. I was to go and help out any way I could, to work off the 200 hours I was supposed to complete. I met him about 40 hours into my service. The lady who worked there asked me to keep him company, as his best friend from the war had passed on 2 weeks prior, and he was keeping to himself. She thought, since I was liked around the place by the others, he might take a liking to me and open up a bit. I agreed and went over to him. For the first 2 hours or so, I tried to get him to talk, but he just sat there looking out the window, like he was lost in thought. I talked about different things, but he just didn't seem to care. I asked him about the war, and he just kept looking out of that window. I was going to give up when I decided to try one last thing. I told him my grandfather was also a veteran, but he'd fought in Korea. He seemed to stir at this, so I kept going. Told him he was wounded trying to take a hill he was ordered to capture. A medic had saved his life. After that, he was shipped back home and swore off war. The old vet looked at me and gave me a slight smile. And then he spoke. Your granddad was a smart man. I swore off war when I finally got home. But I'm going to let you in on something. You can swear off war, but you never really let it go. He then talked all the time after that. He told me of those days back then and how much time had changed. He talked about women he'd loved and lost, the struggles and benefits of a post-war life, what it was like during the Cold War, and so on. One thing I noticed was his reluctance to talk about the war itself that he'd fought in. I mentioned it a couple of times, but he always said, maybe one day. This went on till my last week of community service. The final day, we sat down as usual in his favorite spot by the window. He told me he was sad I'd be going, and that he'd enjoyed his time talking with me. Then he said he wanted to tell me one last story before I left. He had never told anyone outside who was there that day this story, not even his late wife. He said whether I believed it or not was up to me. I was interested and listened up. He took a drink from his mug, cleared his throat, and started to spin me his tale. I was part of the landing team that hit Omaha Beach that fateful day in June. The airborne guys took off first ahead of us earlier and landed in the early hours that morning. The ship ride over was tense. Feelings all around were of fear and anxiousness. But we were a proud bunch, and we weren't going to let something like death get in our way. At least, that's what we told ourselves. That morning, the first wave of men hit the beach. It was an intense situation. I was part of the third wave that assaulted the beach, and by then, we were starting to gain a foothold and start to move our way into the bluffs themselves. The fighting had been raging on for a few hours by that point. I made my way to the other troops at the sand wall that separated us from them. We eventually broke through and took the bluffs, then were ordered inland to make a perimeter to repel any counterattack that Krauts might throw at us to retake the bluffs. Half the day in, and we'd established a beachhead. I was lucky to survive that day. It was also my first time killing another human being. Wouldn't be my last. I stayed on that beach for the next week. During that time, I was sent on small patrols to make sure Fritz wasn't sneaking up on us. On the 14th day, I was summoned by a captain to be part of a 9-man team to go check out an abandoned cemetery reported to have enemy activity. Locals that were fleeing the area had reported seeing a small German squad holed up at the cemetery about 9 miles west of our beachhead. The cemetery was just that, a cemetery out in the middle of nowhere. There was no sounding village within miles of that cemetery. The captain's orders were to go and clear out that squad. He then assembled a team. Besides myself and the captain, there was Johnny Tudor, a rifleman, Rizzo Caprice, a rifleman, Donald Watlick, our radio man, Michael Espinosa, our BAR man, Eugene Cardinal, a rifleman, Tony LaRouche, a rifleman, and last was René Ledupre, another rifleman. This made up our Nazi hunting squad. Tudor and Cardinal were from Tennessee, living in the same small town. Caprice, LaRouche, and Espinosa all trained together in boot camp, and all ended up in the same company, same unit, and now the same squad. Watlick was pulled to serve as our radio man. He also spoke French and German. None of us had known him before then. The captain's origins were a mystery to us all. Then there was the Cajun, one René Ledupre. He was the most queer out of all of us. He and I were in the same Higgins when we landed. We both took out a machine gun team and were together when we held a line from a possible German reinforcement. He was, all in all, a good soldier. We were to take only weapons and ammo. Anything that we didn't need was left. We were to be light as the captain, whose name was Howard Wright, wanted to attack quick and swift. We were to set out just before dawn and use the cover of darkness. At least, that was the plan. There was a full moon out that night, so we tried to stick to the shadows as much as possible. We were to reach our destination in around a few hours, but had long pauses along the way. Sometimes we thought we heard movement. Most of the time it ended up being a sheep or a cow. About an hour in, and Johnny started speaking first. "The moon makes things look eerie out here," he said. "What's the matter, Johnny? Spooked?" Michael chimed in. "Not really. Well," Johnny started before he paused. I could tell he looked a little nervous in the moon's glow. "You all remember that movie where that man turns into a wolf?" "Yep, I do," René answered. "What about it?" "Well, that movie scared me a bit. I was 16 when I saw it, and it stuck with me. When the moon's full, I get spooked a bit." Everyone but the captain laughed at that. "So, let me get this straight," I said. "You have no fear of a man with a rifle trying to kill you, but you have a fear of this made-up movie monster?" "No, that's not it," Johnny said in reply. "I don't want to die. Hell, dying out here scares me greatly. It's just, that movie spooked me, that's all." "That monster isn't made up," René said. "It's a real thing, at least where I'm from." An awkward silence fell on us. "What do you mean?" Johnny finally said. "My mama used to tell us stories about them growing up," René replied. "She used to tell us not to wander too far in the woods or near the swamps, or the loup-garou would get us." "What's a loup-garou?" Johnny asked. It's the Creole word for werewolf. It's a man that can transform into a wolf. A wolfman, if you will. Mama used to tell us about her encounters with a few growing up herself. It's not like in the movies. They don't just turn because of the full moon, though it does influence them a lot more to come during that time. No, Mama said they can turn whenever. Those that are more attuned to it can control when and where they become one, but it can also trigger during extreme distress. "Like, what kind of distress?" I butted in. completely drawn into Renee's story. Well, Mama said one time when she was a young woman, she was coming back home from her cousin, who lived on the same street as her. As she was crossing the road near where it turns down her lonely dirt road, she heard a couple of men arguing. The sun hadn't gone down all the way, and she said it was still bright enough to see. Said she saw the two men yelling about something, and one of them pulled out a knife. The other man started to run from him, yelling not to do it. The man with the knife proceeded to chase him. He tackled the man not too far away and proceeded to stab him. The man fell, writhing in pain. The other man started to walk away from him, when all of a sudden, the man on the ground started turning into this beast. The other man ran into the surrounding woods as the beast man got up and sniffed the air. It howled something fierce before turning to look at Mama, and then it ran into the woods in chase of the man. "Bullshit," chimed in Tony. "That's a lie if ever I heard one." "Mama don't lie," Renee said in defense. "She has never lied to us. Besides, if you lived where I do, you'd be inclined to start believing in some of the things that go on out there. They got the voodoo out there. Witchcraft, vampires, ghosts, the things that'll give you the heebie-jeebies." "Quiet," the captain ordered. "Keep your eyes peeled." We walked on in silence until we reached the outer perimeter of the cemetery. In the moonlight, we could see the old chapel-like structure. There were no lights on or any sound coming from the cemetery. Headstones lined the way up. Motioning us to take a defensive position, we found points of fire and waited. Captain wanted to see if the enemy was still around. After about 20 minutes of listening and watching, the captain decided to send someone up to check it out. I was volunteered. I was already on the side of the road the cemetery was on, and quickly made my way to the first headstone. Peeking over, I saw rows of gravestones and not much else. Slowly, I made my way through the forest of stones, keeping a desperate ear out for sounds of anything. After a bit, I was close enough to the church house to notice nothing was there. As I crossed the open field towards the church house, I noticed one of the graves had been dug up. A big hole was where there should have been dirt. I kept on moving till I reached the church. From what I could see in the moonlight, it was small. There was the wide open door leading in. On either side of the door were windows. Peeking in, I saw moonlight coming in. There was a hole in the roof. Besides a few broken chairs and debris from the roof, the church was completely empty. The back of the church had a single window at the center. I could tell the window still had glass. Checking around the church, I noticed nothing else. On the other side was a forest. I went back a ways and motioned to the others that it was safe. I waited by the first set of headstones as the others came up. Everyone came rushing up to the church house as the captain asked for a report. Several of the boys were looking inside the church, while the others were looking out into the cemetery. Renee walked over to the dug-up grave and started to kick some dirt in. "What happened here?" he said. "Dunno," I replied. "It was like that when I walked up here. Whatever they was doing, they seemed to have left in a hurry." As I watched him kick some more dirt in, he looked up at the sky. "Pretty, isn't it?" he asked. "See the moon rising?" Before he could finish, shots started ringing out. I saw Rene get hit twice and fall into the open grave. We all took cover and started shooting back. Muzzle flash was coming from the tree line. We started hearing German voices, and the captain quickly started issuing orders. A grenade went off somewhere, and we all took cover. Captain orders us into the church house to take up defensive positions. As we all ran inside, the Germans were yelling out something, and the muzzle flash started to get closer to us. Bullets and broken glass were raining down on us. Eugene and Donald tossed a couple of grenades out the front windows as Michael and myself got the front door shut. We put a few of the broken chairs in front of it to hinder the enemy trying to enter in that way. We were all panicking as the barrage of bullets were seemingly overwhelming us. The first screams came right outside the door. The German soldiers that were outside the church door started screaming and shouting at something outside. That was quickly followed by the other Germans shooting at something that wasn't us. Soon, we heard yelling and screaming as gunfire was being shot all around us. We looked at each other with frightened, confused looks on our faces. The shooting suddenly stopped, as did the screams and shouting. We listened for a few seconds for any sort of noise or sign that someone was still out there. A body jumped through the window as we all reacted and pointed our weapons at it. It was a German soldier. He was bloody and looked like he'd been attacked by something. The captain quickly went over to him and picked him up by his collar to his feet. "What's going on, damn it?" he yelled at the German. The soldier looked visibly frightened and was shaking. Captain yelled the same words at the boy again. "Wadlik, get over here. Tudor and Caprice, watch those windows. Cardinal, watch that back window." Donald went over to the captain. "Ask this piece of shit what the fuck they were shooting at out there," Captain ordered. Donald told the man in German. The soldier looked back at Wadlik and said only one word. "BloodySpaghetti." "What the fuck did he say?" Captain demanded. Donald turned to him with a confused expression. "He said, wolf beast." "Wolf beast?" Captain said in a confused tone. "Fuck," Johnny exclaimed. "Did he just say wolf?" He didn't get to finish his sentence as something grabbed him and tried to pull him out of the window. He screamed, holding onto the window beam as we rushed to help him. Something had a hold of Johnny's legs as we tried to pull him back in. He was begging us not to let him go, as his grip was slowly being pulled away from the beam. I went to the side of the window and stuck my rifle out. Something grabbed a hold of it, trying to pull it out. I reached for my pistol and fired blindly outside. Nothing happened. I then peeked out. Looking back at me were two orange eyes inside of the head of what I can only describe as a huge wolf. Its teeth, I remember, were stained in blood, as was its mouth. I let go of the rifle and jumped back in horror, yelling, "What the fuck was that thing?" In one swift pull, poor Johnny was yanked out of the window, his screams now blood-curdling. Everybody backed away from the windows. Johnny continued to scream for a few seconds before it abruptly stopped. We all stared at the windows before the captain shouted, "Oh fuck, the prisoner!" We all turned, expecting not to see him there. Instead, not only was he there, in a corner, but he was shaking profusely and crying. He was, for the lack of a better phrase, scared shitless. Tony goes over to secure him as the rest of us take up defensive positions. We're staring at the windows now. Michael sets his BAR up, pointing to the back window. Myself and Eugene each have our rifles pointed at the front window. Donald has his pointed at the door. Rizzo and the captain are at the center of the room. "Wadlik, where's the radio?" Captain calls out. "Sorry, sir. I dropped it during the gunfight outside," he said. "Oh, son of a bitch, Wadlik. Do you know where?" "Not far from the door here, sir," he replied. We all tensed up as we knew what was coming next. "Someone has to go out there and get it," Captain said. audible fucks were said as we didn't want to venture outside of the church. As it turned out, we didn't have to. The radio came flying through the window, destroyed. A loud howl rang out. The thing bashed into the door that we'd reinforced with debris from the church. Donald backed up a bit more before firing a couple of shots through the door. We heard it run around the church. Michael started firing a few rounds while cursing. Eugene and I started firing as it ran past the windows. It again bashed into the door. The door gave way a bit. Rizzo and Donald ran to it and tried to reinforce it again. Once again the beast bashed into it, pushing it a little further open. I ran over to help them, and together we managed to get it pushed closed before it bashed into it again. Tony ran over to the window and started firing in that direction before retreating from it. A growl was heard from the door, and it started to run around the church again. We all took our positions again, waiting for it to attack once more. Michael let off a few more rounds as it passed his window, and then it got quiet. It didn't last long, but during that very brief moment, I was really on edge. The tension was so thick you could cut it with a knife. Johnny's body came flying in through the window. He landed a couple of feet from me. Rizzo ran and dragged him to the center of the room, checking him for signs of life. "He's still breathing, you guys," he said. Captain knelt down and checked on him. "Oh, he's messed up pretty good," he said, to no one in particular. "The son of the bitch out there cut him real bad. We need to get him back to HQ or he ain't gonna make it." For the rest of the night, the beast would bash the door and then run around the church. I noticed at first that dawn was approaching. I let everyone know and we all just stared at the window. The beast was right there in front of it. We all saw it. Its matted, blood-soaked fur, orange glowing eyes, bare stained teeth. It let out this most awful howl before retreating. We heard it scream as if it were in pain, before it fell silent. No one moved. We all had our ears on high alert, listening for any sound. None came. I was volunteered to go check outside once the sun was out and shining. I did it hesitantly. Rizzo and Tony removed the debris from the door as Eugene secured the prisoner. Once the debris was removed, I gave the signal to open the door. As soon as it opened, I ran out, not knowing what to expect. What I saw was sure not what I'd expected. Blood, guts, and body parts scattered the front of the church as well as the cemetery. It was the kind of carnage that I'd only previously seen on the beach. That thing tore apart every German soldier out there that night. As I was comprehending what it was I was looking at, I heard the rumbling of a tank approaching. I ran back into the church and let the captain know. We all took up defensive positions, not knowing if they were friendly or the enemy. I had never felt so happy when a Sherman came into view. We all stood up as our boys came into the cemetery, setting up a defensive perimeter. Captain went up to his superior as the rest of us walked over to the Sherman. A few rows of jeeps lined up behind it. "Oh, you boys had a hell of a night," some private said as he walked by us. We were all tired and frankly just wanted to get the hell away from here. Johnny was carried out on a stretcher onto one of the jeeps. The prisoner was brought out as well. "Got a live one here," someone called out. We made our way over to the commotion when, to our surprise, René was brought out of the grave he'd fallen into when he was shot. I noticed right off the bat that his clothes were in tatters. He was barely clothed, in fact. It looked like he'd been attacked as well. but he had no scratches or any marks on him. On top of that, he looked like he hadn't been shot at all. There were no bullet wounds which I could see. Everyone else walked back to the Sherman, but I stayed. I was trying to rationalize what I was seeing. As René was being carried away past me, he opened his eyes, looking at me. He smiled and gave me a wink. And that was the story he told me as I remember it. He stated that no one else knows what went down that night besides his squad. He doesn't know what went into the official report that his captain made. He said that I could take it or leave it as it was, but that's what he remembers of that night. We talked a bit more before I said goodbye to him for the last time. He wished me well, and I went about my way. He passed away not long after. Makes you wonder just what the hell is really out there in this increasingly small world we have. I know one thing, though. I will not be going near, around, or directly to any place in Louisiana anytime soon. "Your Highness?" called a meek voice from the corner of the long hall in which stood a tower of a man dressed in a World War I Russian military uniform, high grey hair hanging loosely at the edges of his face. "Your Highness, I'm sorry we had to call you, but—" A wave of the hand of the larger man, who turned his attention to the source of the speech, smiling, halted the meek voice. "I'm sorry. I'm not used—" The smaller man spoke, with an apparent embarrassment in his voice. "It's all right, Timofey. I am no longer a prince, nor a grand prince. I'm just Vleslav Bryachlievich for you." The man spoke with an elegance in his speech. "When you are as old as I am, my friend, fewer things seem to spark your interest. To be honest, these kinds of things seem to be the only ones that make me experience some joy nowadays," he continued. "My apologies, sir. It takes time to digest everything. I'm sure you're aware of that. I'm still not quite used to you being a werewolf," the smaller man answered sheepishly. "I am not. I am a seer, a shaman, if you will. One of the few who still truly practice the art. We all have extraordinary skills. You will get used to the many odd things in this world if you make it long enough," Vlaslav remarked, with a clear parental tone into his voice. He was talking to an adult, but at his ripe age of nearly a millennium, everyone seemed to be a child. "I hope I do, sir," Timofey answered. On to business. Why was I summoned?" the former Prince of Polotsk inquired. "Yes," Timothy, who wore a neat butler uniform, responded. "Follow me, sir." He gestured that the two of them should walk towards a room near the edge of the hall. "Sir, we have come across a being that poses a threat to our society and does not seem human," the butler said as they began making their way towards the room. Is that so?" the former prince questioned. "Appears so. Unless someone acquired technology akin to ours, it's impossible for a human to burn out the insides of another human being," the butler retorted. I see. I assume you've sent a contingent of Omega-level operatives to deal with said target," the former prince answered. "Omega, Gamma, Beta, and even Alpha-level operatives, all of them never returned alive." I see. Shameful." "Truly sad, sir. The loss of human life is never the pleasant kind of news."
"Indeed, but that's why we're here, my friend."
That's why this organization exists. We do what we do to prevent the needless death of humans as a result of abnormal threats. The two men had reached the entrance of their designated room, and a feminine voice had risen out of the room. I wouldn't call your involvement in 2 world wars and a myriad of other local conflicts between humans a part of that cause, Vleslav. Vleslav chuckled at the remark, before retorting. As a former prince of these lands, I must protect them from all kinds of evils, Miss O'Reilly. The feminine figure walked up to the two men and handed Vleslav a folder which contained the information about the aforementioned contact between the organization and the suspected creature which resulted in the deaths of many organization members. The file included the detailed autopsies of the deceased organization members and the grotesque photographs of their charred and disfigured corpses. It appears it is the work of an... The woman spoke, before being cut off by Vleslav. Yes, seems like it, he responded to her mid-sentence. His mind ran wild with what appeared to be fond memories of some event from the distant past. It's been a while since I came across one of these, Vleslav reminisced, to himself, quietly. I want to come with you. The woman's voice broke Vleslav out of his nostalgia-induced trance. This desk job is driving me crazy, Prince of Polotsk, she continued. Ruby, I could never stop you from doing anything. I'm not even going to try. Make sure you don't die, however, Vleslav said, in response to the woman's demand to tag along. Timofey, please fetch me my sword, Ruby requested of the butler. Immediately, miss. Thank you. And with that the butler disappeared back into the darkness of the hall. Ruby's green eyes had shimmered with excitement at the prospect of being able to work in the field once more. She began chuckling to herself as she went to grab her long black trench coat. Save that mood for later, my lady, Vleslav said, as he watched his colleague walk around, gleaming with joy. Aye, your majesty, she remarked as she moved past him and towards the doorway. Vleslav followed behind, and once they stood in the hallway, a robotic voice called out through the intercom system. Agents Lycan and Banshee, please approach portal chamber SC-173. After you, my lady, Vleslav gestured to Ruby to walk first towards their destination. As they walked, neither of them let out a sound. They were both people of few words, even fewer with each other. Throughout their years of working, they developed a bond strong enough to formulate a sort of telepathic link between the two of them. They did not need to speak to understand one another and cooperate in perfect sync. Ruby threw her trench coat around her shoulders, and they walked towards the portal chamber. Once there, Timofey approached Ruby and handed her the weapon she'd requested earlier, a customized Nodachi. Your weapon, miss. Why, thank you, Timofey. Ruby thanked the butler as she took the Nodachi from his hands and held it over her shoulder. She looked at Vleslav, who was looking at her, filled with pride that his pet project had become one of the most successful agents in the organization, and called out to him. Shall we? After you, my dear, the mountainous humanoid gestured once more. Ruby approached the portal that would lead them to their target, and as she looked at the swirling blue lights emanating from the device, she looked back at the staff, asking, Is there anything we should know about this location? Yes, there are many civilians there at the moment. Seems like a party of some sort, one of the operatives answered. Ruby, in turn, just chuckled before stepping into the portal and Veslav followed her without saying a word. Once Ruby had stepped out of the other side of the portal, she found herself standing on a stage at a rave. The whole area was illuminated by colourful lights that swirled as far as her eyes could see. Electronic music blared out all over the area, and crowds of people were completely mesmerized by their trance-inducing environment. Veslav stared at the naked man that had been dancing before Ruby and the crowds. The tattoos on the man's body made Veslav smile like a little kid at a candy store. He's the angel, he'd remarked. Ruby unsheathed her Nodachi and remarked, gleefully, "Such a waste of a good body." Slowly, patiently, quietly, she made her way towards the naked angel until he was within a touch's reach, and then she leaned close to him from behind and whispered in his ear, "Game over, pretty boy." The crowd in front of them didn't notice them. They were too enchanted by the music and the lights. Before the angel could react to Ruby, she stabbed his heart through his back. The angel coughed as her blade slowly cut through his insides. His tattoos began glowing with a purple glint to them. It was too late, however. With a swift and powerful motion of her arms, Ruby ran the sword upwards, slicing her target in half. A fountain of dark blood sprinkled all over, covering the stage, the assassin, and the first row of people in front of the stage. The people hadn't broken out of their entranced state, and just continued dancing and singing as the naked man fell to his knees. His flesh was pulsating and slowly reforming. He was an angel. Killing an angel is not as simple as bisecting him. Hence, Ruby dropped her sword like a guillotine onto the man's heart before she twisted and turned it. With that, she had released the small, organic blood pump from its vascular confines inside her target's chest cavity. She then yanked it out with her sword and proceeded to bite into it, for good measure, before tossing it to the ground. "No healing for you, my love," she mockingly remarked at the man's dismembered form as it caught blue fire. Veslav watched the whole ordeal without interfering. He had come to enjoy his protégé's sadistic methods. After all, he knew what she was, and that's exactly why he'd brought her into the organization. Her mindset, her neuropsychological inner workings were perfect for that kind of job. He didn't want her to end up in some ditch or behind bars, and so he'd taken her under his wing. He turned her into an angel of death. "Good job," he was about to say, as a bright flash of light threw him off guard, blinding him and Ruby, who screeched in pain as the light burned her eyes. She covered herself up, and the light began subsiding. A loud, booming voice that sounded like 10 people speaking through one mouth came out calling at the duo. "You will pay for this. You will burn in hell for killing my brother." As the lights died down, Ruby opened her eyes to see the crowd in front of her no longer focused on dancing. No. Instead, they were all staring at her, trying to stare through her soul with light shining through their eyes, purple-tinted light. The crowds had been possessed. The music and projector lights slowly died down around them as Ruby's mind drifted towards a single train of thought. Kill. Her pained expression had turned into one of joy. Her grin grew so wide it became almost painful to smile for her. "Kill, kill, 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 kill," she began calling out as the possessed hordes slowly made their way towards her, crawling to her like a mass of mindless zombies. "I am gonna kill you all," she screeched before throwing herself, blade first, into the mass of mind-controlled humans. With each swing, she claimed a life. She was precise and lethal. One blow per one life. With each strike of her blade, she had soiled the soil beneath her, the blood of mortal men. Soon enough, the green-eyed assassin stood in the middle of a river of blood as mind-numbing ecstasy filled her senses. She let out a burst of maddening laughter before pouncing on top of her remaining targets, and with each strike, her killing blows became more and more brutal and crude. She was out to make the act of dying painful for them, increasing the dose of pain for each victim with each passing strike. She didn't slow down until she was the only living person standing. All the while, her crazed laughter filled the night's air with the mortifying call of a death goddess. At the same time, Veslav pounced on the second angel in the form of a wolf, biting his head clean off. Veslav landed on the ground just as the second angel's body crashed, headless and bleeding profusely from the neck. Veslav roared like a pissed beast, and then his gut began burning from the inside. As he panted like a dog, his belly exploded, sending gallons of blood and viscera all over. A booming voice came out of the beheaded corpse's neck. Foolish dog thinks he can stop me. A head reconstructed itself on the corpse as it rose back up. The angel was still alive. He walked up to Veslav's broken canine form and kicked at it, sending it flying a few yards, showering the ground below him with guts and rib powder. The second angel spread out its massive wings, made up of light, and flew up to Veslav's seemingly lifeless body. He then picked up the wolf and raised it into the air. "I am going to kill you by tearing your pelt off, and then I will do unspeakable things to that girl. Do you understand me, silly dog?" The angel was about to land another blow on Veslav, but when his fist connected with the canine skull, the whole wolf disintegrated into dust that fell around the angel, who stared at the space in front of him, confused. "Show yourself, coward." "Nothing. I know you're not dead. I haven't pulverized you just yet." "Nothing." The whole situation felt awfully wrong to the angel. He could feel it in his core. Something was wrong. Veslav wasn't a werewolf. He knew something about him was different. Doubt had begun creeping up on him. Puzzled, confused, and scared. Feelings the angel had yet known were beginning to take over his physical form and clouded his judgment. The angel started looking around frantically, shouting profanities at Veslav, and even threatening his partner. But the seer did not seem to be anywhere in sight. Ruby was too preoccupied with the hordes of the possessed people to even bother looking at the second angelic being. She just twisted her head in disappointment at the supernatural creature when she realized he'd become completely overcome by fear. Just as the creature was about to make his way to Ruby, he felt a sharp pain at the back of his neck, one that ran down his spinal cord and spread to his limbs, after which everything below the point from which the pain had come felt numb, and gradually all feeling was lost. The creature could barely turn his head before he noticed a large, furry humanoid creature grabbing him by the neck. Veslav began landing blow after blow upon the angel's body. Each blow produced a sickening, crunching sound that indicated the breaking of bones and tearing of soft tissue. The angel was overcome with pain. He couldn't even heal his broken physical body, because with each attempt to heal a wound, Veslav opened up 3 new ones. The seer had used his immense strength to punch a hole through the angel's stomach before he pulled out his large intestine and hung it around the angel's neck like a noose. He then proceeded to toss the angel in every imaginable direction, using the former's innards as rope. Each time the angel's body made contact with the ground below him, a little bit more of his digestive system was exposed to the elements. That made every moment of the experience excruciatingly agonizing. The angel could no longer even think straight. All he could do was be a prisoner in his own mind, as a monstrous wolf man turned his body into a pile of shit and pus. Angels are powerful creatures. However, they have their limits, and they are certainly capable of dying. Veslav dealt with angels in the past, and thus he knew how to overload their capabilities. Once the seer had enough fun, he dragged the barely lucid angel towards the mount of corpses atop of which sat his partner. She sat there, covered in blood and viscera, adoring her own macabre handiwork, with a maddened smile smeared all over her face. Veslav tossed the angel towards her and gestured with his head upwards. Ruby stepped down towards the angel and grabbed him by the head. At this point, his body had begun regenerating itself. However, his regeneration wasn't quick enough, as when Ruby yanked his head backward, Veslav slammed his fist into the angel's jaw, sending it flying, along with a lightning bolt of ungodly pain, straight to the angel's brain. Ruby recoiled her arm, shaking it as if she'd been struck herself. Whoa, I forgot just how powerful you can be, Prince. Veslav smirked and tilted his head sideways, as if to gesture that he was sorry, before reverting back to his human form. It's fine, Ruby responded as her hand travelled down the angel's face. The angel was paralyzed with pain, and the thought of what this sadistic duo might do to him, his lack of lower jaw, made it impossible for him to speak. Suddenly, he felt a hand reach down into his mangled insides. He began making gurgling sounds, and Ruby told him to shut up, as she was actively trying to find something. His heart. The angel's insides were so messed up one could reach from the esophagus to the lungs, and vice versa. She touched it, her heart's desire, the angelic heart. Found it, she yelled out gleefully. As the assassin touched the angel's heart, his whole body spasmed in an agonizing stream of neurological torment, and then the acidic contents of his stomach swam up and burned Ruby's arm, making her recoil and curse at the creature for not controlling himself. The angel threw up his stomach acid all over himself, causing him to spasm even more, making Ruby shove his carcass downward. Veslav wasted no time, and landed a devastating spinning kick to the angel at the same moment the latter hit the ground. The blow was so devastating, the creature's whole chest cavity was blown apart, exposing the heart and lungs, which were covered in shards of bone and yellowish mucus. Ruby got up to her feet, adoring the damage caused by her partner, and proceeded to stab his heart with her nodachi, before she pulled it out with a single stroke of her arm and presented it to Veslav as a mock sacrifice, at which he burst out laughing. That was fun, Ruby exclaimed. Yes, it was. Good job, kid, the seer exclaimed before activating a device which had opened a rift in the air, causing a bluish light to explode through it. After you, my lady, he gestured to Ruby, who stepped into the bluish light. The seer followed closely behind, and as he did, the rift closed behind him. Once they passed through the rift, a familiar voice greeted them. Your Majesty, Miss O'Reilly.
Don't call me that, butler, Veslav barked.
My apologies, sir. The mission was a success, Timothy. Now, I shall have a bath and some tea, please, Ruby said as she stared affectionately at the butler. Oh, and that. She pulled off her sleeve, displaying the chemical burns on her arm. Immediately, miss. What about you, sir? Are you going to return to your slumber? The butler asked Veslav.
No,
I think I'm going to stay awake for a while longer. It seems you guys are slowing down. There were 2 of them. 2 angels. You detected 1. Oh, my. The butler expressed his surprise at the fact. I definitely think I should stick around for a while longer, Veslav continued sternly. So be it, sir. I hope you enjoy your stay above ground, the butler replied. I'll attend to everything in the meantime, he continued as he began making his way out of the portal room.
Oh, I know I will. What with all these things roaming about lately, the seer remarked under his breath, before he blended in with the shadows. I know I will.
And so once again, we reach the end of tonight's podcast. My thanks as always to the authors of those wonderful stories, and to you for taking the time to listen. Now, I'd ask one small favor of you. Wherever you get your podcast from, please write a few nice words and leave a 5-star review, as it really helps the podcast. That's it for this week, but I'll be back again same time, same place, and I do so hope you'll join me once more. Until next time, sweet dreams and bye-bye.